This is Mr. Coker with Algebra Lesson 1-1, Factoring Quadratics when a equals 1. So I want to start by explaining what that means. When we have a quadratic expression or a quadratic equation, what it means is that the largest exponent is a 2. And there's no exponent. We have an exponent of 2, and there's no exponent larger than 2. So if you look at these three, so I have these three examples I'm going to use. We have an x squared next to a second power, and then no larger exponents in any one of these. You could have a quadratic, it could just be x squared. That by itself would be a quadratic. You could also have x squared plus 7x plus 6. That's also a quadratic. As long as you have an x squared, an x to the second power, and nothing larger, that is a quadratic. So, when I say a equals 1, when we're talking about quadratic expressions or equations, we've got the coefficient of x to the second power, that is your a value. The coefficient of x is your b value, and the constant, the number that doesn't have a variable, that is your c value. Now those values could, except for the first one, those values can equal 0. The first one can't, x squared cannot equal 0. But the other two could. But it goes A, B, C. The C is usually easy to remember because constant starts with C. Okay. A equals 1 means that if we have a number in front of x to the second, or x squared, then that would be the coefficient. If we don't have a number listed, we assume that number is 1. That's why A equals 1. Now, getting to the actual math of this, after getting through the introduction, when we are factoring quadratic expressions, what we're going to do is take something like this that typically has the 3 terms, and we're going to factor it into 2 binomials that start with x, and we'll have x plus something and x plus something being multiplied together. It's the opposite of multiplying polynomials. When we don't have a number in front of the x, this is a very easy process. So here's how we do it. Now this is what our final answer always looks like. So I went ahead and wrote that in. We just need to know what numbers to put at the ends. The first thing we do is look at the constant, in this case 6, and we say what 2 numbers are multiplied together to make 6. Well, there are 2 sets of numbers. There's 1 times 6, and there's 2 times 3. 1 times 6 equals 6, 2 times 3 equals 6. So both of those pairs of factors are good, but we have to know which one to pick, because and to find that we add each pair together and see which one gives us 7. Now you could probably look at that and say, well, 1 plus 6 equals 7, and of course 2 plus 3 equals 5, so that's not right. So our answer is 1 and 6. And you can check it. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 plus 6 is 7. So we know that is the answer. Now when we have a positive and a positive, it's a lot easier. What if we have one where we have a positive and a negative? Well, same thing you start with. We're going to do our two parentheses. And now we're going to look for factors of -4. Well, how do you get a negative? Well, if you remember, to multiply to a negative, we need to do a positive times a negative. Well, what multiplies to 4? 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. Let me put those in red to make them stand out a little better. 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. Well, we want to make those, of course those give us +4. We want to make -4. So we could do -1 times +4, and we can do 1 times -4. We can do -2 times 2. We could also do +2 times -2, but that's the same thing, so I don't think we need to repeat that. So once we have our factors listed, we add them together. What is -1? Now remember, we're not timesing now. We're going to do, what's -1 plus +4? Well, that is +3. Notice that that is the b value, the coefficient of x in the expression. That means we have our answer. These pairs, I just cross them out because we don't need them. We know that our answer is going to be -1 and +4. And again, double check that. -1 times +4 is -4. -1 plus 4 is +3. Now I'm going to do the last one. Now notice x squared minus 7x plus 6. It looks just like the first problem, except instead of a plus 7x, we have a minus. Okay, I'm going to start with the same idea. Putting it in our proper format, and we need to fill in the numbers. Well, we know from before, do multiply to make 6. We have 1 times 6, and we have 2 times 3. We also know that 1 plus 6 is 7, and 2 plus 3 is 5. Notice any problems with this, because 1 plus 6 is 7 is +7, but we don't want +7. We want -7. So the way around that, we have to think, well, what will give us a negative? Remember that when we're multiplying, not only can we do a positive times a positive to make a positive, we can also do a negative times a negative to make a positive. So these aren't going to be good, so I cross them out. Well, what's -1 plus -6? It is -7. So we know that's not going to be good either. So -1 plus -6 is -7, and -1 times -6 is +6. So I can write that in. I'm going to erase the plus sign again. We'll have x minus 1 and x minus 6. And that is factoring quadratics when a equals 1. The way that I kind of went through this, you see a lot of math on this board in 3 problems, and you probably can notice that, oh, it looks difficult. It's actually not. The next video that I make is going to deal with factoring quadratics when a is greater than 1. That one's going to be a little bit more complicated. With these problems, start by finding your factors of the c value. Just find the factors, the numbers that multiply to make this number, and go from there. And you'll see that it's actually not that hard once you do that. Always start with the factors of the c, and you shouldn't have much trouble. So anyway, thanks for watching and have a nice day.